hopefully Kelly and Jerry can keep them quiet.
All right, we should start seeing some people coming here, baby. And I got everything's positioned. I'll get this out of your way.
Thank you.
And don't let me forget the 3, 2, 1 business to start recording. The podcast part, I mean. All right, rabbits.
Wait, I'm going to do this. Maybe before January's, I'll revamp this, because why don't we just start all at the same time?
Okay.
From here on out. I'll do it as according to the script this time.
Okay. Sounds good.
I mean, if you're going to be this difficult to work with, I don't know what to do.
I'm well known for being a prima donna. I truly am. Marlo Ann Lord, hello. First one with a message in the house. How is everyone today? Got people coming in on the Facebooks. Still connecting on Twitter and Twitch and LinkedIn, because I'm sure there is somebody out there somewhere who watches
on
this
Saturday.
Saturday on LinkedIn. Watching motivational tapes and things of that nature. Let's see. We got Tracy Shank. Hello. Trevor Haney. Hello, sir. How are you?
My brother's not going to get to see this show because he's at the Army-Navy game.
Very nice. Very nice.
Wearing a Ganster T-shirt that I didn't even know he purchased.
As usual, Facebook filling in. We're starting to notice more and more of being cut off at the knees on Facebook. I was telling Nate about this yesterday. We post stuff and get 2 looks at it. It's very, very strange with the 25,000 people on the group. But we'll be figuring out what to do about that very soon. Actually, A and I are in cahoots. We're cahooters. We've got some stuff going on. Now, you guys will not hear about it for a couple months, but now we've got one person on YouTube. Hello, Simon. Hello, Mary. And I'm still watching I'm watching the trailer because it's so good. All right, baby, ready to go live?
I am. I can't. Yes.
I can't see a damn thing.
I can't see anything either. We're suave, though. We got 3, that going for us.
2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the rabbit hole. Today we will see how far down it goes. Also, you have to hold out your S's if you're talking about things with the Matrix. It can't just be, my name is Scott. It's got to be, my name is Scott. And pronounce your T's. Scott properly, too. And you know what? Are you ready to go, babe?
Yes.
Is this our video intro?
Yes. No, you should bring Rob on now.
We bring Rob on now. Let's go to Rob Otto. Ladies and gentlemen,
God,
Mr.
you
Agent
look so
Otto
good.
in the house.
I love it.
Hello, Mr. Anderson.
You love it. Dude,
I realized I don't have just a black tie, so this is just a monochromatic tie, so I'm not really Agent Smith. I'm more like Agent Schmitty, right? Like Mr. Anderson. What up,
I
bro?
gotta fix you. There we go. Okay, back to guest. There we go. Now everything should be looking.
Yes,
back to
nice.
A-cam.
I like it.
Darn it.
I like it.
Yes,
Here we go.
A-cam.
Here we go. Finally sorted. Okay, you guys. So this is the beginning of our show. Before we start the podcast, I have to remove my glasses because I can't read the script. But we do this every week. This is, of course, our pal Rob Otto on the other coast. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing fantastic
You keep
and
talking about
wonderful,
what
and
I'm doing
I
wrong here.
can't see crap either, so
I
I'm
know.
going to have to take
It's
my
a great idea, but it did
sunglasses
not
off.
pan out.
I don't know how Hugo Weaving did it, but hello.
And there we go.
There
I
we
finally
go.
fixed the cameras. Fixed cameras for all you lovely people.
So out on the West Coast, we are drinking a Cosmo, which is red,
I'm
and a
taking
blue
the red
Hawaiian.
pill, apparently.
That is blue.
This one's a little more purple, though. So
It is.
I eat all the pills, so therefore...
Robbie, what about you?
Well, it's odd because every drink I tried to make, they all tasted like tasty wheat. Did you guys ever eat tasty wheat when you were a kid? So whatever I made, I just put it in a blue cup because
There
honestly,
we go.
if
Blue
Morpheus,
Solo cup.
Listen, if we're in the Matrix, I've been here for over 50 years now, and the idea of getting unplugged and starting over just sounds exhausting. So as soon as he said, take the blue pill and you'll wake up in your bed, I would have snatched that thing.
You're
had
like,
it
can I have a
down
blue pill
before-
every night before bed? Every time? Can I just...
honestly, because before he even would have told me what the hell the red pill did, I've been gone. I'm good.
That's so funny. I love it. So if you guys are familiar with, or even if you're not familiar with our video podcast, we are about to talk about The Matrix for an hour. We strip out this audio and run it in the podcast feed. So I'm about to do another faux intro, and you guys are going to hang tight as we do it. Scott, are you ready to record?
I'm ready to record. We are recording, and go ahead, sweetie.
This is StorySmack, a podcast about stories and storytellers in the world of pop culture. My name is A.B. Sigler, audiobook narrator and founding partner at Empty Set Entertainment.
And my name is Scott Sigler, #1 New York Times best-selling novelist. Whoop, we're over here.
Yep, just keep going.
Oh, you know, we'll just start the whole thing. What did you want me to see?
I was just following along here. Let's just start over. Well,
Honestly, I'm impressed he got the second name right. So that was.
So this is I
Oh,
the
okay,
intro
I got
for the
it.
podcast.
Stop recording. This is live TV, everybody. Here
We'll do it live.
Again. Do it live.
We'll do it live.
And
This is StorySmack, a podcast about stories and storytellers in the world of pop culture. My name is A.B. Sigler, audiobook narrator and founding partner at Empty Set Entertainment. And each week, I'm joined by #1 New York Times bestselling author Scott Sigler and screenwriter Rob Otto. How are you guys, gentlemen?
I'm good. Rob, how are you?
I am feeling like I want to go into the desert of the truth, or what the hell does he call it? I don't know.
Desert of reality? Welcome
Yeah,
to the...
sure.
You know what I'm
That
gonna do?
works.
I'm gonna scorch the sky, whatever the F that means.
Yeah,
scorching
yes,
the
yes.
sky,
We
we
do
didn't-
know that we're the ones who scorched the sky, so we
Yes.
got that part right. Woo!
Yes.
All right. So this week, if you guys can't tell already, we are discussing the 1999 movie The Matrix. Can you give us,
I
FDO? Can you give us
wait.
the movie guy synopsis? Uh-oh, maybe. If you
Whoa.
can read it.
I'm going to give the movie synopsis in my best Lawrence Fishburn. Neo believes that Morpheus, an elusive figure considered to be the most dangerous man alive, can answer this question. What is the Matrix? Neo is contacted by Trinity, a beautiful stranger who leads him into an underworld where he meets Morpheus. They fight a brutal battle for their lives against a cadre of viciously intelligent secret agents. It is a truth that could cost Neo something more precious than his life.
It's interesting, you guys, because he also uses that voice when he is speaking for my dog. So is he a bad guy? Is Squeaky a bad guy?
Squeaky, of course, is a bad guy.
Is a bad guy, of
Yeah,
course.
Squeaky, of course, is a bad guy. All right, let's talk about the box office goodies
That's
of this
me.
movie.
Yes.
For sure. This is always a fun part for me because it's really hard to imagine. A lot of times, this is one of those where the special effects cost more then than they cost now, but they probably look a little better now than they did then. But they really did a good job of it. The Matrix cost $63 million to make back in 1999, or 1998, I guess, which is about $105 million in today's dollars. It made $466.6 million at the box office, which is about
Holy crap.
$777.6 million today.
That's
So,
just the first movie.
yes, and by all accounts, a smash hit. It's an interesting thing because I think this world sort of really did kind of sort of smash into our world as a whole unique thing, and to a certain degree still has it. I will say one of the my favorite things about it was this new, as a big movie buff back in the day, seeing bullet time for the very first time was amazing to me. It was absolutely, it's one of my favorite things that every time I see it, I remember, like we watched it again, this movie last night, and I remember what it felt like to be like, what? How did they do that? And I actually felt it again. What about you, Robbie? What's your favorite?
Yeah, mine's along the same lines, and especially like all the way that they mixed practical effects. Like that wasn't digital, the bullet time stuff, because it was done with still cameras, many movie cameras, and then all edited together. They did the same thing when Trinity in the opening scene, floats in the air, getting ready to kick the policeman, and then they do the 360 turn around her. It just blew me away. And now you see stuff like that all the time. But
Yeah.
the Wachowskis just innovated all this and did as much as they could with practical effects, and that's pretty freaking cool.
And what about you?
I've got two favorite things. I think the first 5 minutes of this movie, the first 5 minutes of the screenplay, to give you, yes, there's a sense of normality. Also, there's some absolutely bonkers stuff going on, setting the stage for all these questions that actually do get answered later. And then the second favorite thing is, while researching this, I discovered what is now a 20-year-old site called whythematrixsucks.com. I highly recommend. Whoops, lost my glasses.
Uh-oh, out of the Matrix.
I'm out of the
Yeah, I don't
Matrix.
know how Lawrence Fishburn did it with that thing just sitting on his nose like that.
I
Okay.
highly recommend everybody get yourself a cocktail, take 15 minutes, and go read whythematrixsucks.com. It is absolutely hysterical. Some fairly accurate criticism and just some general crappiness as well. You look good in those, baby.
I would have to, the whole time, just sit like this, though.
But we forget this movie is that old. And when this movie came out, it was the cutting edge of all the technology, and all of this virtual reality stuff seemed so doable, and we were right on the cusp of it. But then you read whythematrixsucks.com, and it's literally a 20-year-old website, and it's all janky with graphics and everything. It's the best.
Should we talk about the cast and the crew?
Yeah, let's talk about the cast and the crew. Let's go switch over to main for us, baby. And then, we got to go to actors. There we go. Let's dive into it.
We'll start with the Wachowskis, of course. The Wachowskis originally conceived the storyline for The Matrix as a comic book. That's not true, baby.
Oh, it's not?
Yeah, no.
Sorry. Now it is.
And,
go back. You're fine right there. My bad.
And they had both at the time that they finally sold the script, they had both previously written comic books for Marvel, or comics for Marvel. And they had actually worked on this movie, this vision, and the thing they actually shot for about 5.5 years, and they went through 14 full iterations of the script before the final product. And when the final product arrived, it had a storyboard with 500 boards, which is exactly what you need, I think, to create a universe like they did. There's a few other things that we'll talk about when talking in general, but I think that they really worked very hard to create this whole universe and then sort of stay in the same kind of realm as filmmakers, because after the commercial success of The Matrix, the Wachowskis wrote and produced the 2005 film V for Vendetta, also a little dystopian and dark and everything else, and continue to make movies now. This is the first Matrix movie that both sisters will not be directing. Lily has decided the one coming out this month. Lily had just come off of back-to-back projects and wanted a break. So, and there's apparently a lot of info on the internet, a lot of distress around whether or not something happened to the Wachowskis, but she just needed a break. That was all.
Wanting to take a break before the fourth movie of this juggernaut is amazing. And then, of course, we seem to have him on almost every other week, Mr. Keanu Reeves.
But there's so many pretty pictures.
He underwent back surgery before he started working on the film. A fusion of his spine had caused the beginnings of paralysis in his legs. Reeves was still recovering when fight training started, and he couldn't kick for the first 2 months. He has only 80 lines in the first 45 minutes of the film. Before his character's final speech at the end, Keanu Reeves never has more than 5 sentences in a row to speak. So there's not a lot of soliloquies for the then young man. He lost 15 pounds and he shaved his entire body, including his eyebrows, to film the scene where Neo wakes up in the real world attached to the machines. It is also that was also one of the last scenes filmed for the movie. It really does look like a completely different person than that.
Honestly, I look at him and I still really can't see him. Right, I even tried to pause it last night and cover up where his hair should be and stuff. Yep. And I swear, it does not look like Keanu Reeves. I'm like, did they use some other actor? But no, it's him. That's how weird people look.
At the time, he was already reasonably slim. And so him losing 15 pounds and then dark hair, it would be the same thing for you, Robbie. Dark-haired humans shaving their eyebrows looks crazy pants.
It looks Voldemort.
Because if you even, I was about to say a similar thing. When he's in the interrogation room and Agent Smith gums up his mouth and takes away his lips, he looks a lot like Keanu Reeves with a physical effect there. I mean, it's a good physical effect, but he still looks very much like Mr. Anderson. Not so much in the pod at all. It's very goofy.
And it's because
I was also trying to make a dig at Scott's bald head there, but it just flew right past you guys.
Yeah, basically. I think you would look still like Rob Otto, but without eyebrows, because what Keanu Reeves does all the time, he covers up his demon ears. If you watch those scenes, he's got some horribly misshapen ears up top, and I'm glad he has at least one flaw, but I think that's what it is.
Internet's boyfriend with big ears.
The moment when Neo vomits after leaving the Matrix for the first time was apparently not acting. The story from the set was that Keanu Reeves ate a chicken pot pie that disagreed with him. So I would love to know that he was so in the moment of acting that he's like, hey, I don't feel so good. Can we roll the camera? And then, right on camera. That is incredible. And
Now, is this where we should tell the story about Scott eating 48 pounds of chicken and biscuits and releasing that? No, that's not the time
if
for
we
this
have time
story?
at the end of this, Rob, we will.
Oh, okay. All
I
right,
doubt
just
we'll have
check.
time, but if we do.
That's a real story?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Oh,
I
my
understand.
goodness.
Yes,
we will have
real.
time for that, I believe.
That's a whole 30-minute story for Sigler and Place one night.
Yeah, for sure.
And now, of course, one of my favorite actors, Mr. Lawrence Fishburne. Rob, tell us about this man.
I mean, what can you say about Lawrence Fishburne? He's just fantastic. And the funny thing is, a lot of people that they wanted to get to star in this movie started reading the script and were just like, I don't get it. I don't understand. It's all very philosophical. And Lawrence Fishburne's like, are you people all stupid? Because he's just like, I read it. I get it. I think it's freaking amazing. I'm in, right? But the funny thing is he was worried that it was so smart that nobody in Hollywood would ever pay money to make this movie because nobody with money is ever going to understand the script. So he's like, I'm in. I just don't think you're ever going to get this movie made. But if you do, I'm in. I get it. I understand. So, as a New York City kid, went to the High School of Performing Arts. He was, in fact, he was named after Laurence Olivier. So the fact that this kid who's named after Laurence Olivier goes on to become an amazing actor and one of the pinnacles of acting of our time is pretty darn cool, right?
And starts he of course is in, because he's a city kid, he's in I can't quite remember, but I remember reading an interview with him where he talks a lot about being confused with Samuel L. Jackson, and Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, right.
It was like a joint. It was, I don't know why they were joint interviewed, but it was this thing where this happens often, and it happens even when they're together at a press junket.
They get asked about the wrong
And they
role.
and so they went back and forth. And the thing that I remember about it was Lawrence Fishburne saying, I believe that my work stands for itself. And if you look up Lawrence Fishburne, there's not a lot of info really about him out there. He's not where, Pacino talks method and De Niro talks method because they're at they're part of their life where they're teaching and whatever as well. Lawrence Fishburne wants his work to stand on its own, which is fascinating that he keeps getting confused with Samuel L. Jackson because there's things like this. He was in Apocalypse Now, you guys.
Yeah, right, exactly right. Yeah.
Lawrence Fishburne's in Apocalypse Now as a teenager. What? That's a huge marker. And people are like, Sam, how's it going? I don't understand.
And he was in Quicksilver, with Kevin Bacon. So, when he was Larry Fishburne. I mean, come on. How could... Yeah.
It's so... And he's seemingly fine with people, just having his work stand... or Samuel L. Jackson's work stand for him, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there's worse things than to be mistaken for Samuel L. Jackson, for sure. Like the biggest box office star of all time. I was going to say,
haven't Samuel Jackson, between the Star Wars movies and the Avengers movies, hasn't he made more money than anyone ever in history?
He's the highest grossing movie star of all time is Samuel L. Jackson.
Mistaken for him at the cash checking.
And of course, now we got to talk about Carrie Ann Moss. Hey, tell us about this actress.
So this is kind of fun too, because Carrie Ann Moss, this is not only her first big movie, but it is her first movie. It's huge for her.
Amazing.
The first time she sees herself on the big screen, on the silver screen, is the completed screening copy of The Matrix that she works. That she watches with the crew.
Shit.
Yeah, it's
so
kind of a cool thing. And she was so absolutely in it to win it. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but the entire crew and cast worked together for several months before the production began to get their fight training done, their choreography done, all of that done. Very early in that process, Carrie Ann Moss very late in that process, the training process, she twists her ankle training and doesn't tell anybody because they think that she's afraid that they may recast her if she can't do the shoot. So she starts the shoot after months of practice with a twisted ankle because she would not tell anybody, so she just sort of powered through it so that she'd get the part, or she'd get to do her part.
That's how good of an actress she is. She can act like she doesn't have a twisted ankle. I mean, come on. Come on.
And to me, I feel like this is one benefit to, really a true benefit that she didn't anticipate of having the practical effects. So she was always in often the main actors were in a Peter Pan rig so they could help with the jumping and stuff. And all of that meant she could put a little less pressure on her twisted ankle because she was supported from the above. On the final day of her shooting, if you guys have never been in any kind of a production, as each actor wraps, there's normally a little moment where there's a round of applause and a thank you because they won't be coming back to work the next day because they're done with their shoot. On her last day of shooting, the Wachowskis presented her with a champagne bottle inscribed with "Congratulations, now you're an action hero." And like I said, the very first time she saw the first full cut of the movie was the first time she saw herself on a movie screen, which I think is fantastic. And then the last thing I'll say is that we've talked about this already in our intro for this show, but the Neo Trinity 3-minute lobby shootout scene took about 10 days to shoot, and there is no CGI in it. I find that so fantastic. And there's even we saw it last night, and there's if you remember that scene, the last thing that happens is the elevator goes ding, and it opens. And I don't think it opens, but there's a ding, and then there's all this debris and smoke and everything. And one of the pillars falls apart, like the marble breaks.
Yep.
Not planned, just a total, and they leave it in the opening scene because it's so great.
I watched that last night. Like, that's a nice touch. They must have had put that up and then had boop, a little remote control.
I think of it as, because I knew that going into what we also watched it last night, and going into that, I thought that's very much like I now know when Han Solo, when Leia says to Han Solo, "I love you," and he says, "I know." That's an ad-libbed moment. Doesn't matter. Every time it gets me. Same thing with that pillar.
It's interesting that you mentioned that Carrie Ann Moss had a sprained ankle, and she didn't want to tell anybody because she might get recast. Because we have to talk about. I got my guys messed up.
Hey, Joey Pants.
We're gonna skip past Joey Pants so I can continue with what I thought was an awesome segue. I forgot Hugo Weaving. We're gonna talk about Hugo.
We're gonna talk about Hugo Weaving.
We're gonna go back and look Carrie Ann Moss for a second. I forgot Hugo Weaving, but Hugo had to undergo hip surgery.
Well, here, hold on. I'll put my glasses back on.
There we go.
Just pretend like I'm Hugo Weaving. Okay?
There you go.
Well, just, you know what? We'll go back to the guest scene so we can just stare up. Hugo had to undergo hip surgery after being injured during flight training. This completely shifted the shooting schedule, and Weaving's fight scenes were completed at the end of the production in order to allow time for him to heal. Agent Smith refers to Cypher, who we'll talk about in a moment, as Mr. Reagan during their meeting. This makes him the only character in the movie besides Neo to be identified by both their Matrix identity and their real-world Handle identity. Is that it for Hugo? That is it for Hugo. Now we move on to the wonderful guy who stole the show, Mr. Joey Pants.
And always steals the show.
Always steals,
right?
always
steals the show.
But subtly, just effortlessly.
Joe Pantoliano is in a lot of movies. I mean, you look him up on IMDb, you got to scroll and scroll and scroll. And listen, not all of them are winners, right? But I dare you to find a Joey Pants performance that isn't a winner, because there's just something about this guy. I mean, we're talking all the way back to, Risky Business, and I mean, he's just been in some iconic movies and some really trash movies, but you always get the best out of Joe Pantoliano, and I think he's wonderful, and he plays Cypher. He, what is it? Spoiler alert. He double crosses everybody, and he's the one who says, to Neo, "I bet you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Why didn't I take the blue pill?" Right? I mean, and he wants to go back in the Matrix. He's pissed that he's not in the Matrix anymore.
For sure.
I got a feeling that's the way a lot of people would react, and that's why, in later movies they talk about mass unplugging everybody. That most people don't want to be unplugged.
I thought
kind of an odd thing.
And the thing you're looking at the screen now, you guys listen to the podcast can't see it, but it's Joey Pants looking at the steak on the fork, looking at it longingly. And there's a lot of batshit crazy in the screenplay.
Well, for sure.
But there's so much exquisite, subtle work in the screenplay. Yeah. And this guy, the thing he longs for the most, it isn't, I don't want to go back and have children. I don't want to go back and have a fantastic love affair with an amazing spouse. He's like, I want to eat goddamn steak again. I want to be taken away by the creature comforts of life.
And this particular scene you're talking about is beautiful because of course, he is a villain in this movie. He is, right? But he's only a villain if you have a human perspective. If you're Agent Smith, or you're Joey Pants or Cypher in this movie, it's a reasonable, rational thing for him to want to forget that stake isn't real. And we treat him as a villain because we're human. But in reality,
think about this.
I'm not sure.
He's been awake for 9 years.
Yeah.
Right? He's been eating that mush, that, nutrient-enriched mush for 9 frickin' years, and nothing but mush for 9 frickin' years, except when he's in the Matrix. I don't think I could go on a 9-year mush diet. I'm just saying. I think it would drive me frickin' batty too.
Well, and you see this happen with the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar a lot in this right before he goes. We know he's a bad guy, and things go wrong with Tank. It goes wrong. They talk about like, oh, but okay, so yeah, Morpheus thinks you're the one. And all of the stuff around Neo being the one is cagey because everybody has a prophecy that only works together, but they don't work apart. So like Carrie Ann Moss is supposed to fall in love with the one, and Neo gets told he's not the you have the chops, kid, but I don't think you feel it. The fuck does that? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, it's so unfair. But
listen,
you think
just have a cookie, you'll be fine.
but Cypher has literally watched Morpheus do this. Yes, guys. Yes, I was wrong the last 16 times. This is the guy.
This is my guy.
This time,
This is the
I
guy.
got him.
And so you think like he's got to be like, dude, what did I do, man? I'm old. I just want to eat steak and have the Matrix, and because this guy's going to do this his whole life, and I kind of understand that. I don't think I would have made that choice, but I understand that choice a lot.
Now, here's the big thing. If you're really paying attention of the very first couple of lines of this movie, you know Joey Pants is a bad guy because he's talking to Carrie Ann Moss, and Carrie Ann says, "Is this a secure line?" And Cypher says, "Well, of course it is. Yeah, absolutely it is." And of course, they trace her. Because it's not a fucking secure line. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What's
did
in
that.
this blue drink I'm having right here? It's not a secure line because he's giving all the information to Agent Smith and all of his cronies. So right from the get-go, no, it never comes up again. She never asks, how did they trace me? They just go along and say, boy, they're getting better at what they do. And no, they're not.
But if you guys, we're going to move on to some general notes about the movie here in a second. But if any of you guys rewatch this again, make sure you watch with remote control in your hand and pause at 1 minute, pause at 3 minutes, pause at 5 minutes, and think about the amount of elements the Wachowskis introduced in that time, the amount of suspense, the amount of questions they serve up that they do actually answer, and then watch it at 10 minutes. It is really a masterclass in how to create an entire mythos out of scratch, have it be mostly internally consistent, and hook you from square one with all these teasers. It's a wonderful, wonderful script.
Tim Fairhouse in the chat room for the video cast that we're doing, so you can't see this if you're obviously on the podcast, asks, is he really a villain or is he more of an anti-hero? And I think that's a terrific question. I would posit he's sort of both. He could make the choice, right? He could figure out a way back into the Matrix and double-cross the agents and not the Nebuchadnezzar. But he doesn't do that because he's mad at everybody. He doesn't care at all. And I also think he's probably an anti-hero because his storyline, of course, just like Robbie just said, that we never follow up on where the fail was in that original extraction. He is absolutely surrendered. The agents care even less about him than the humans do. And we never follow up on that either. Like, he never got anything except exactly what he fucking deserved.
Now, here's an interesting point, though, to his question. The vast majority of people don't want to be unplugged. They don't want to know that they're in the Matrix. So, from their perspective, the vast majority of people would say, boy, Cypher's right. Can we stop these weird elements from messing with our reality? Because I got to get back to my 9-to-5 job, which I loathe, and yet I go to every single day. So, I don't know.
That's a good point. That's a really good point, actually.
All I'm saying.
But he can go back, he can be rich, he can be somebody important, he can eat steak all day long.
Or just the last part. He'd be fine with the last part, too.
Seeing as that we are not vegetarians or vegans. We just eat less mammals.
Yeah.
And I admit, I watch Joey Pants eating this egg. I'm like, oh, that look real
Oh,
good.
that looks good.
That
Now,
look real
the good news is I eat enough mammals for all three of us. So
Good,
we're
thank you.
good. We're doing just fine.
Taking one for the team.
Yes.
This is
so let's
amazing.
talk about the idea that that this was too smart for Hollywood, right?
Yep.
The Wachowskis brought this to a lot of people over 5 years it took them to finally get somebody to buy in. Nobody wanted this, and it's interesting. The more kind of virtual reality programming that went out there, the less people liked it. Like they would bring up Johnny Mnemonic, which is another film that starred Keanu Reeves, and it is not a good movie.
No,
it is really
not.
poorly done. And so all the Hollywood folks, all they could see with their money was, well, nobody's doing this sci-fi virtual reality. It's not working. And
Right.
the Wachowskis are like, it's because they're doing it really, really poorly. There's a clever way to do this that people will be able to relate to. And again, unlike, Lawrence Fishburne, it went over so many people's heads.
Yeah.
Finally, they got it. And they were like, okay, fine. Here's $10 million, said Warner Brothers. And of course, the Wachowskis asked for $80 million. Okay. And so this is how sure they were. And I got to tell you, this takes some huevos, which is funny because, they're transgender and they're women. But they took the $10 million that
this
they
makes me
got
nervous.
and they spent it all on the opening scene. They spent $10 million on the opening scene, brought it back to Warner Brothers and said, listen, you give us the money we really want, this is what you're going to get. And they saw Carrie Ann Moss floating in midair with the cameras all around her and went, okay, we'll give you $63 million. And they're like, okay, we can do it for that.
We can make it. We can pinch the pennies.
What if they say no? What if they say no?
If they say no,
we gave you $10 million.
You're in an enormous amount of trouble because that's straight up fraud.
Yeah, exactly right. You
Well,
gave
no,
us an
I mean, it's
8-minute
just over
movie.
budget, but significantly over. Yeah, it's probably fraud. Now that I say it out loud. But
that feels like fraud to me.
Yeah,
maybe in
now that I
Hollywood they
think it
call it
through.
something else. But yeah, that feels like fraud.
But
So-
the thing is, like, that has happened to other people. We've had many stories. Well, not many. We've had a handful of stories in Hollywood which have the same trajectory, like Ishtar,
Yeah,
which
right.
did not actually pan out. And like Boondock Saints, which we did before Robbie's time, I think, right? Or did we do Boondock Saints? No, we did Boondock Saints with you.
Yeah, I was
There's
with you guys
several
for
of
Boondock
those
Saints,
where the big picture idea that didn't quite work in Hollywood but worked in the director's head kind of pans out, but it's so rare. So what a huge multi-million-dollar risk they took and panned out.
Huge risk.
And
But they were right.
Let's talk about this. This is amazing. Of course, I can't say this was a star-making moment for Keanu Reeves because he was already a star, but this was the icing on the cake, perhaps.
Well, let's hold on there. Look at his few films right before this, though. He kind of came up and then was
Johnny
kind
Mnemonic,
of melting.
Bill and Ted. He hadn't done Point Break yet, had he?
No.
Yep.
Okay, so but the people who are considered for this, both Will Smith and Nicolas Cage formally turned down the role of Neo. Will Smith said no so that he could make Wild Wild West. Will Smith has done fine. It didn't hurt him too much. He's a big dollar guy. Ewan McGregor turned down Neo because he was filming Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
I have to
think that
step
worked
back
out
for
okay for you.
1 second to Will Smith, who chose to make Wild West instead of The Matrix. Yes, he's fine.
Yeah.
But who would have he been had he been Neo? Like, oh my goodness, who would that man have been had
point.
he been Neo?
That's
And
good.
not the mechanical spider guy.
And the smartest guy in the room in this conversation apparently is John Cusack because he lobbied hard for the role. He wanted the role big time. He saw what was going on. Tom Cruise, Johnny Depp, David Duchovny, David Schwimmer, and Leonardo DiCaprio were all also reportedly considered before the filmmakers settled on Keanu Reeves for the part. So that is
Settled on.
settled on.
Settled on.
It's probably you got the Wachowskis did so many other things so right in this movie. You have to think out of all of that amazing talent and that box office power mentioned right there. They're like, this is the right guy. We need to get this sweet innocent faced guy to do all this crazy stuff, and it worked out famously.
All right, well, let's do the same thing with Morpheus then, right?
Okay.
I mean, we talk about, and Would anyone else have stood with their arms crossed behind their back the way? I mean, I can't even frickin' do it. It's very uncomfortable. He spends every time he's standing there, he's got his arms crossed behind his back. Who else would have done that? Nobody. But here's some of the names that they considered: Russell Crowe, Gary Oldman, Val Kilmer, Chow Yun-fat, Sean Connery, and Samuel L. Jackson were all considered for the part of Morpheus. But thankfully, they believed Lawrence Fishburne when he said, "I get it, I'm in." They gave him the part, and the rest is history because he was just perfect,
and
absolutely perfect.
I will say this: this is the thing that there's several other movies that this cast and these directors make together, right? Sometimes, or the cast especially. So, Hugo Weaving and Carrie Ann Moss go on to do Memento together. And then they all come back together. So, and of course, John Wick includes Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne in very powerful yin and yang kind of roles again. Yep. So I kind of love this idea that The Matrix sort of pops into our world as this whole universe that is still kind of accreting star-making vehicles, because the relationship between Neo and Morpheus, I posit exists between Lawrence Fishburne and Keanu Reeves in John Wick as well. That same kind of back and forth energy, like we need each other to survive kind of energy. I think it exists in both.
As long as we're going to talk about all of the people who are considered for all the roles, and obviously at some point, this is the first film for the Wachowskis. There's some huge second film.
Well, they did Bound before this, which also had Joey Pants in it, which is also if you've never seen Bound, oh my God, go watch Bound.
Gina Gershon and Jen Tilly as partners.
But clearly.
It's worth it, honestly, just for that, Thanks for pointing that out.
Yes.
So that
Hollywood knew something was up with this movie because so many people, so many giant stars considered this role. For the role of Trinity, Janet Jackson was approached to play the role of Trinity, turned it down because scheduling clashed with her tour. Keep in mind, at that point, Janet Jackson was one of, if not the biggest pop star on the planet.
Absolutely. No
and
doubt.
as a massive sci-fi fan, she was upset about it. She later referred to the film in the intro and outro interludes of her 10th studio album, Discipline, which was huge. Jada Pinkett Smith auditioned for the part of Trinity and even screen tested, but had no chemistry with Keanu Reeves. Michelle Yeoh and Jennifer Beals were considered for the role of Trinity. So there's a lot of high-level actresses and famous people at the time considered for that role.
And you can think of things like Jennifer Beals absolutely proved herself as a physical actress. She could do the work, right? I bet she could have done the work at whatever age she was at when The Matrix was being filmed, too, because that role required such a physicality. I find it fascinating that Carrie Ann Moss, of course, always appears as an action hero, where Jennifer Beals, having done a feminine version of action in The Dancing, she is not often considered for sort of action hero roles like Linda Hamilton is and Carrie Ann Moss is and things like that. It's pretty interesting.
I also wonder if Jennifer Beals could have acted like she didn't have a sprained foot. I'm just saying. That's all I'm saying.
With an athletic background, I can tell you, acting like you don't have a sprained foot is not an easy bit of acting. That takes a lot of focus. The lead actors trained every day for 4 months. In order to pull off the fight scenes. Just like the Hong Kong martial arts movies that influenced them, the Wachowskis wanted the actors, not stunt people, to be the ones fighting on screen. If you've not gone back and watched the Hong Kong action flicks from the late 80s and the early 90s, it's that this further compounds the amazing ability of the Wachowskis to pull off this hodgepodge of influences, the crazy mythos world building, the pure sci-fi, and all of it mixed into a straight American action Hong Kong action film. There's so much Hong Kong action flick in this. The high wire stuff, all of the really highly coordinated, well-executed combat scenes. Well, it does not work if you have a stunt double playing these parts.
And this is an interesting thing that you bring up, because the stunt coordinator for this movie, his name was Wen Wu Ping.
Okay.
And he is one of the biggest, or was at the time especially, one of the biggest fight choreographers in very high demand at the time. And he was asked to consider doing this movie and didn't want to do it. Didn't want to deal with he wanted disciplined actors and everything else. So he just named an outrageous price. And was like, fine, they'll negotiate. And I'll be like, nope, don't have time. They never negotiated once. Not one time. They were like, yes, please. And then he was like, oh, no. Also, I need to have complete creative control over all of the choreography for the fights, thinking they'd be like, okay, well, it's Keanu Reeves. And they were like, okay. And that was it. And he became the fight coordinator. And you actually, a choreographer, sorry. And you actually see quite a lot of that discipline because one of the hallmarks of Hong Kong martial arts choreography, especially at this time with like Old Boy and all that other stuff, is these characters are doing all the work themselves. So if it's a fight, if it's a dinner scene, if it's a martial arts fight as opposed to a bar fight, they're doing all the work themselves, and that's what he insisted on. And you can really, I think that combined with what Robbie was saying at the top of the hour of the physicality of everything and the practical effects every way they could do it, make you feel very specifically placed in this completely fictional universe. They literally tell you the Matrix isn't real. Mm-hmm. And then you cringe when people get hit, anyway, because it's all so very visceral to the humans you're watching go through that, I think.
That was one of the few hand-wavy parts of this movie, along with, why don't they use livestock for the batteries and things like that, is that you're in this imaginary world, but you're still taking a beating to the point where you've got some kind of internal damage that makes you bleed. So that as a creator of many different worlds and a world builder in my own work, and I've done stuff where like I'm going to create this whole mythos, this whole world that you've never seen before and make you believe it's real, is really, 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 really hard to do and keep it consistent. And while the Wachowskis did an absolutely incredible job, one of the best jobs ever at it, there's still a few rough patches where you could not dial that down. And you have to wonder if they probably had bigger explanations and write number 7, write number 8, rewrite number 9. Eventually, like, we're just going to have to let these elements go because we want to see the guy in the chair with blood in his face.
Except here we are in 2021, and this is definitely a very thin reach. I am telling you I am reaching. But in 2021, we're learning about the connection between your brain and your gut. And if your gut health isn't good, maybe you get depressed, which doesn't make any sense in our world knowledge as it currently is. But if our brain can affect our body should be able to affect our brain. And I think that kind of works in The Matrix. It might not have worked in 1999. And to be fair, maybe that's too far afield and it doesn't work now. But I sort of think it does.
Rob, what have you got on this movie for us?
Well, let's go to the most important thing, of course, the S&M Club. Hello, that's,
How have we not talked about it already?
Exactly right. He follows the White Rabbit, and it's this great S&M Club, and there's freaking, Rob Zombie music playing, right? It's like, yeah, all right, yeah. And the funny thing is, you look back and go, wow, they really went all out with these actors and the costumes and all the extras in the background. Nope. That was a real S&M Club in Sydney, Australia, called the Hellfire Club, which all X-Men fan will be familiar with the Hellfire Club.
Good point.
They basically just put it out there and said, listen, everybody show up like it's a regular night at the S&M Club, and we're just going to have a whole bunch of cameras shooting scenes for a movie. So everyone in the background is just a regular at that Hellfire S&M Club.
It's
and
great.
They're just in the background wearing their clothing. And I got to tell you, seems like one, a fun way to keep the budget down, and 2, a fun way to have the instant after party ready to go when he gets cut at the end.
Rob, when one of our movies gets made, we're going to make sure, now, okay, we're greenlit, we're going to add a scene. And it's going to be an S&M Club.
It's just one scene. It's in a Sydney S&M Club. And shooting's going to end early that day.
It's fine. Shooting's going to end early that day. Some simulacra and simulation by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard was required to be read by most of the cast and crew.
You are the best French reader ever.
Jean Baudrillard.
Wow, you guys.
How do you pronounce it? Baudrillard.
Jean.
I see.
Hang on. Baudrillard.
This be a D.
Yes, but
D's pronounced G?
But
not there.
It's French.
In the middle.
Beaujolais. Jean
That's
Beaujolais.
definitely not Beaujolais.
John Bergarder.
John Bergarder from Des Moines. It was one of the Wachowskis' influences with themes and philosophy of the film. It's also the book that Neo hides things in. And when I did not know this till you guys, and Rob did the research, but I watch it and I'm going to have to look that up when I watched it last night because clearly they showed us the name of the book for a reason. Now I know the reason, and I didn't have to look it up, and you guys are great.
Also,
this is one thing. I'm sorry, but let me jump in here. I did not see this movie in the theater on its initial run. I totally missed this movie, and it's odd because, it made like, $170 million domestically and opened up at like $27 million first weekend, but it came out in March of 99. It wasn't until I'm watching the Oscars in early 2000 that it won. It was nominated in 4 categories: editing, sound design, sound editing, and special effects.
Special effects.
And won all 4 of them.
Wow.
And my wife at the time and I are sitting there going, what is this movie? And it's funny. After they accepted their 4th award, the Wachowskis, as they were walking off stage, just yelled because the music was playing, right? They got played off, right? What is thematrix.com? And literally we went to the computer and went, what is thematrix.com? And it showed everything. And so we had to, was Netflix around by then? However, we got the DVD, watched it. And then a few years later, it came back out again in the theaters. And so I got to see it on the big screen.
Now,
But
the
it's,
Oh, yeah,
DVD
right, before Revisited.
The
yeah.
DVD was a groundbreaking thing. I remember watching the DVD with our friend Bernie, and it was one of the first movies to take advantage of the DVD format. You could follow the White Rabbit. You could put in all these subtitles. You could have, every time a rabbit shows up, and it's frequent, a little white rabbit would appear on the screen. They did all of this stuff that I don't think people had really done before to immerse, like, okay, this is a digital format. We can add context to the movie. We can add different things to the movie, aside from just a director's commentary, etc. And so the Wachowskis were even way, and that could have been the marketing department, you don't know, but the whole, everything about The Matrix from top to bottom was so ahead of the curve. From special effects that had never been done before, ever been done before, from doing things with the DVD that had never been done before. It's really just a masterwork, and stepping back from the actual screenplay in the film and trying to look at things in a broader context. What is thematrix.com? Things like that. It's just absolutely
they're amazing.
Work.
They're absolutely amazing. And yeah, with a little white rabbit would appear on the screen every once in a while. And if you hit like enter on your remote control on your DVD player, it would take you to like a separate scene. And that's how the first time it pops up is when that 360 of Trinity is going on. And so you can do that, and it like is a behind the scenes. Here's how we shot that. And it was, the series of cameras every 3 feet all the way around her. And they show you how they edited it all together. And it's just like, oh my God, it's like the best commentary ever. Yeah. And then when it's done, it takes you right back to that moment in the movie. It was just so clever. The Wachowskis just think outside the box. It's like there is no box for them. They are just always outside of the box. It's pretty impressive.
It's interesting that neither one of you saw this movie in the theater. I wonder, especially, I know, Robbie, you're a bit more, I'm a bit more like you, a big movie buff, and you love movies but are so busy.
Yep.
But especially sci-fi, though. It really feels like it should have been in our wheelhouse.
For sure. It's super surprising to me. I will tell you this. I saw this and The Blair Witch Project at the same theater, which happened to be the Angelica in New York, and obviously not at the same time. But I saw The Matrix, and we're like, cool, this was badass. Which has all these groundbreaking, really brand new effects, especially bullet time, especially the 360 practical effects with the camera, all that stuff. And we see that a few times. We see that with Trinity when she goes up like this in the beginning. We see it in the lobby scene when she's twirling over one of the pillars. We see it over and over again. Thought, cool, bro, that was awesome. See the Blair Witch Project with all the little like twig found artifact. Like, I'm completely convinced. I am completely convinced when I go in. I know that it's probably marketing, but I am terrified.
That was
I was terrified, and I can't believe they're a similar movie.
Another film of somebody who like the Wachowskis got the concept of, here's the internet. This is a new thing that is finally becoming mature. We can show graphics, we can show video, we can do all these things. Like Blair Witch and this movie both, they were really like, here's this whole other form of expression that we can put things on. And that's what made the Blair Witch seeding that site before the movie came out was what made it.
But here's what's interesting to me, listening to you guys talk about not having seen The Matrix in the theater. So both those movies came out in the same year. And Blair Witch absolutely traded on the idea that the internet was new and scary and weird in a very 1999 way. And The Matrix did it sort of in a 2050 way. Like they were looking at things that we didn't quite understand at the time. But if you look at it, like you can't And I'm not at all diminishing the work that the Blair Witch Project did at all. But the Blair Witch Project literally dead ends because they start at the max that we are willing to believe in 1999 as human beings. And The Matrix sort of starts right there. They're like, cool, you have no idea where we don't even, well, no, we know where we're going because we're elevated people or whatever. But so I find it interesting that The Matrix has lasted and grown from there, but the Blair Witch,
I would like to point out, for those of you who have followed A&I for a few years, you may be familiar with when we put out the hardcover of The Rookie, book 1 of the GFL series. And we didn't know what we were doing. We put out a hardcover book with 16 color plates inside, signed, numbered, limited edition. And A, who's an excellent logistician, assumed that once we got the books in, it would take 5 9-hour days for us to package the book, ship the book, get it out to all of you. A, how long did that actually take?
It took 9 14-hour days instead of 5 9-hour days.
We were screwed if we didn't get this book. If we didn't get the book out, we were dead flat broke and everything. No, tell them about how the Wachowskis went through something similar.
Yeah, so we mentioned earlier that they literally gambled their entire movie budget to get a bigger movie budget, and that worked. They also were greenlit for a 90-day cycle of filming. Yeah. They had to get to Australia. Didn't count the training of their actors, which also took place in Australia and New Zealand. But they got to New Zealand and Australia, and they had 90 days once training was complete to shoot the movie, and it took them 118 days.
It's insane.
And I work in logistics and entertainment all the time, not just with Scott. I have and I will tell you that is so many days over budget.
Yeah.
I can't, 2 days over budget is a huge negotiation. What is that, 28 days over budget? My goodness gracious, I can't even imagine.
And our budget was the two of us. I mean, can you imagine so much film and crew? And just the amount of time it took them to get this stuff right was crazy. The Morpheus scene alone took 6 months to prepare for and to plan. The Morpheus rescue scene, excuse me. It's bonkers.
Yeah, and I mean, and like the Carrie Ann Moss scene at the beginning.
Yep.
Took months to plan and weeks to shoot. I mean, but here's the interesting thing. This is why they probably had all that extra time. By shooting in Australia, the tax rules were so different at the time. Mm-hmm. Their $60 million budget was like $180 million budget in the U.S. So by filming in Australia, they saved themselves so much money that probably the people were like, well, okay, yes, this is an extra $3 million to go an extra, 10 days. But you just saved us $50 million by shooting in Australia, so I guess we'll be okay with it. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy to think of that, though.
And you find again and again that this movie, this franchise, I will say for myself, comes back to the well and does it reasonably well, but doesn't always do what the first Matrix did. And I believe part of that is because the first Matrix was so mind-blowing that kind of fuzzed up a lot of the other maybe critical movie-going person things I would have thought. I'm like, cool, don't matter. That's very pretty with the bullet time.
I have a question for both. You may know this, Rob. Was there a product placement for Duracell batteries? Because we got to see one. And then in the scene in the car with Trinity for the first time, when they find the bug in his body, Switch refers to him as Copper Top. Copper Top, of course, is the marketing slang for the Duracell brand of batteries, which is also the battery Morpheus shows Neo as he explains how the human race became an energy source. Did they get paid for that?
I would like to think so. I mean, they could have used Everready. They could have used any other battery brand, and just changed Switch's insult of Neo when he gets in the car, when she's basically calling him, oh, shut up, battery. And that's pretty much what she says. You're living your life as a battery, you jackass. Yep. Right? So if they didn't, I hope they did, right? Or at least I hope, like Duracell started making commercials, with Morpheus or somebody, holding a battery, because it would have been pretty clever. But
I would have bought batteries if Lawrence Fishburn as Morpheus was showing the battery. I'm like, I'll buy that battery.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, if Samuel Jackson is willing to get out there and tell me to buy Duracell batteries, then... you're just going to let that go? I called him Samuel Jackson. Okay. Anyway.
I thought there was going to be a big finish. I was waiting for the big ending.
That's right. No, it was good. Yeah.
You're like, I was waiting for you to pick it up. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. Well, let's talk about Switch a little bit, because in the original scripts, and it's interesting that, now the Wachowskis are transgendered women. And when they made this, they were the Wachowski brothers, right? So But Switch in original iterations was supposed to be a female in the Matrix and a male in real life. When they switched back, it was supposed to still have, the bleach blonde hair, so you knew who it was, but it was supposed to be a man in real life. Because again, the Matrix is the outer showing of what we feel our inner selves to be.
It's cool.
And it really front-selled the transition that both Wachowski sisters would go through years after this. But I think that would have been. I think it would have been clever. It would have been a clever way to kind of show.
Is that something they wanted to do that the studios pushed back against, or they just said, "This is too confusing"?
I think it probably was a little too confusing, and it probably meant you have to hire another actor, and then you have to try and make sure they kind of physically resemble each other. And honestly, it's just going to be easier and less confusing. We're already making a bunch of confusing crap up. Let's not add one more layer to the confusion.
Right.
So,
and there's also this perfect representation of the Matrix versus the real world again in that same the scene where we first see Switch and the copper top battery in that moment where they have the bug inside Neo.
Oh yeah.
Because when they're using their machine in the real world against his belly that has the little ultrasound on it, what they see on the ultrasound is absolutely part of the Matrix. It's a biological bug, and it's got tentacles and it swirls and everything.
Good point.
What you see go into Neo and what you see come out of Neo is very much a tracking device, not at all biological. Doesn't have flagellum, doesn't have any of that.
Yep.
So when they're looking at the digital screen in the Matrix, they are seeing a fiction, and I find that super interesting because that is. So much of course, the Matrix itself is digital versus biologic. So I think, you guys, we're almost done because we're almost to 3 p.m. Uh-oh. I got Mr.
All right,
Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
And Agent Smith back with me. So you guys...
you better read, because I can't see crap.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not putting on my glasses since we can't read. So... this is it for this week's Story Smack. Story Smack happens every second Saturday of the month. The next one is January 8th, 2022. The three of us will be back discussing Scream because Scream 5 is out on January 14th.
Sweet.
That's it. If you guys want, I don't know if you can read the script, but both of you are done. We're here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You like to talk about scary movies?
Scream is another one. Some of my favorite scripts ever are Blair Witch Project because they had no money, not even enough money to hide cameras. So they said to themselves, how can we write the fact that the camera guy is going to be in the shots? How do we write that into the film?
Yep.
And they did that. And then another one, of course, is Scream. Scream was the first movie to be like, okay, everybody knows there's this math of tropes in a horror movie, in a slasher film. What if the people in the film know all the tropes and talk about the tropes that are happening in the movie? So it's an absolutely brilliant first ever somebody coming up with that genius moment that nobody's ever done before, and that is why it's spectacular. I'm so excited about doing Scream.
It was meta before anyone knew what meta was.
I think they had to describe meta to explain it
perfectly.
It was incredible and fun and campy. So we'll be back on January 18th. January what? 8th?
8th
for that?
discussing Scream. Yep.
All right. Thank you,
Robbie,
Rob.
thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Always good to see you, Sigler. Goodbye, Mr. Anderson.
Goodbye. Go back to Maine. All right. Looks like the sun came out and threw off all my lighting, but it makes my glasses look damn good.
Yes, sun came out. So that is it for episode 77 of Story Smack. You can find Scott and I online. Scott is at Scott Sigler on Twitter and Instagram, and his Facebook page is facebook.com/Scott Sigler. I am at A Real Girl on Twitter and at a.real.girl on Instagram.
And you can find us online at facebook.com/StorySmack. We live stream Story Smack every second Saturday of the month at the facebook.com/Scott Sigler, twitch.tv/Scott Sigler, and youtube.com/Scott Sigler.
And in addition to Story Smack, we do a once weekly during the pandemic live stream called Sigler in Place. It's on Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time, right where you're watching this now.
And we will probably talk about the chicken on a biscuit story in the next Sigler in Place. And we release an unabridged episode of a serialized novel every week. You can get episodes for free every Sunday via iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. Just go to scottsigler.com/subscribe for links.
And for at least one more week, the first season of Scott's Rad Friday afternoon show, Monster of the Week, where he talks to pop culture scientists, actors, screenwriters about their favorite TV pop culture monster, is exactly where you're watching this, and that is every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Is it?
Yes.
And the next season. This first season ends next Friday, so come check it out before it ends for the season.
Yep.
And we hope you subscribe so that you can hear Scott's books and more StorySmack goodness in the future.
And until the next episode, ladies and gentlemen, how far down the rabbit hole will you go? And we will talk to you all